Institute went to court on behalf of Sylvia Mahlangu, who's Maria Mahlangu's daughter, and Satsao. And firstly, like I said, we argued that it is unconstitutional that domestic workers are not included under this act. But also the second part of our argument was that because it's unconstitutional, domestic workers who have experienced injuries or the families of domestic workers who've died, such as in Sylvia Mahlangu's case, should be able to be compensated for a death that happened even before the amendment of the act. And so the next step then is so the Pretoria High Court heard these in two separate hearings and confirmed that it is unconstitutional, and this declaration of invalidity of this section should be applied retrospectively. So we're going to the Constitutional Court to have these two rulings confirmed.
All right, to discuss this further, we're joined by attorney Natasha Moni. Thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
I am very surprised that domestic workers up until now cannot actually claim compensation when injured on duty.
I'm also surprised because unlike the police and our soldiers, they have a backup system. The government then has a system to assist them. But employers don't have a system to assist their domestic workers. So if your domestic worker does fall and injure herself, or your gardener does something very serious while using the lawnmower, unless you have been paying UIF, you're not going to get any assistance from the government.
Yeah. So, and obviously domestic workers cannot afford private attorneys to go and fight a case like this for them.
No, they can't. Private attorneys come at a huge cost. The only thing that domestic workers can do is try and use the pro bono services that many of the the attorneys have. Your big law firms will assist on a pro bono basis if they believe that you're going to win. But taking things to the Constitutional Court is very expensive, and it's not retrospective. The judgment will only go forward. It won't look back.
Yeah.
And so if you have an accident now, you might be doing wonderful things for everybody else, but that's not going to be able to assist you.
Yeah. So let's look at the way forward then. We see that this NGO is actually going to try to challenge this particular case.
Yes.
Going forward then,
yes,
when people are actually injured on duty, when domestic workers are injured on duty, what recourse do they seek going forward?
Well, I would suggest that you right up front find out from your employer whether they are paying your UIF and whether they do have some sort of insurance as to when you are injured on duty. And I would then discuss with my employer, if my employer wants me to stand on a stepladder, for instance, I would discuss with my employer some form of harnesses, some form of protection, some gear to assist you in that process. That's at best as I can do. For instance, the lady who fell into the swimming pool and drowned. You know, employers, if you are going to look after children and you're going to allow those children to swim, whilst the domestic worker is watching your children, you need to teach your domestic worker how to swim and upskill that domestic worker so that domestic worker can be trusted wholeheartedly with your children if they are allowed to swim in her presence.
Yeah, and the type of compensation that we can see being paid out in instances of injury, and then also if there's a fatality, like in this case, the family being compensated, what could that amount to?
It's a breadwinner's compensation, and you will have to prove that your parent was earning this amount of money and that you needed X in order to survive, It really isn't a compensation for Injuries and Diseases Act payout. That would be your breadwinner's payout. Compensation for diseases, for your diseases and your injuries, really you have to prove two things. One is the emotional, psychological damage, and the other is your medical expenses. And then we look to the future. You know, if you have an injury, a head injury, for instance, and you may not be able to do the same kind of things that you were doing previously, they then need to calculate how much you will need in order to be paid for the rest of your life, your working life.
Yeah, and that, of course, is determined by a court, not the employer who's going to probably pay you, I don't know, 1,000 or 2,000 rand a month.
Well, you know, on the 1st of March this year, the national minimum wage has been increased. And so the domestic workers, their wage has been increased to 15.57 rand per hour. That's not very much in terms of your national minimum wage. So you need to, in order to make that livable, you need to add things. If you are remaining on your employer's property, the employer needs to not take that living space away from its salary, for instance. Your employer must provide or try and provide some form of food, make sure that there's water, lights, electricity, etc. After all, these people are the same people that clean your dirty underwear, your dirty plates, see what you've done in your bed, the night before. These people are really the heart of your household. They will look after your household if you look after them.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time and your insight. Appreciate it.
My absolute pleasure.